Attention. Due to the nature of the films discussed, the Civil Gore podcast may contain adult language and themes.
Where's my cake? Brian, it's podcast day. Where's my cake? You promised me my cake. Brian, I'm your co-host and you're supposed to be taking care of me.
I don't hear you. I said I don't hear you.
Brian, you bitch. What do you think I've got you here for? You're just like all the other hosts. You're nothing but a bunch of vultures. Brian, where's my podcast day cake?
Happy Podcast Day! Oh, Brian, you lunkhead. Now you're gonna have to do the show all by yourself.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Civil Gore Podcast. I'm your host, Tim.
And this is Brian, and to continue my lame jokes, I will say that this is now, it's Civil Gore 8, Civil Gore Takes Manhattan.
Well, which is like that's very accurate in your case.
Yes, it is slightly appropriate, so that'll work. And then we'll know what's coming next, which I hope is not the truth. Would be Civil Gore 9, Civil Gore Goes to Hell, the final Friday.
I think we've already gone to hell, Brian.
Yeah, I might agree. Yeah, last week Tim had his own personal hell editing this, which we may or may not divulge later on. We'll see.
Yeah. So we've got. I'm really excited about tonight's episode because we're covering one of my favorite movies of all time. So we'll get to that in just a bit, but first, it's our first chop. I wrapped up the Exorcist TV show, kind of binge watched that over the past couple of weeks, and I'm not going to go too deep into it since we've already covered it, but I did want to say it's definitely worth watching if it hits Netflix or something, and you're a horror fan. And like that type of demonic possession type horror, it's really, really solid for just a network television show.
Oh, cool! Yeah, I gotta watch it because I haven't. I know I've heard a lot of good things about it, and you know it came, and you had a really good recommendation on it, so I definitely think it's something I need to look into.
Yeah, and one thing I enjoyed is it ties in with the movie.
Oh, okay.
So without giving anything away, it does share some aspects of the original Exorcist mythos or whatever you want to call it. So definitely worth watching if you're a fan.
Does it go? Is it all three it connects to, or actually technically four? I guess right. There was the fourth one, but
I can't remember. There may be some. Mainly the first movie is what it's really trying to tie into. There may be some connections, but I've not seen 2 in forever.
Yeah,
it's been years since I've seen 3 or the other one. So
yeah, 3 is actually, I think it's on Shudder, by the way, for anyone that hasn't seen it.
It's really good.
Creepy. Yeah, 3 was surprisingly creepy. That actually, there were some scenes in that I actually, even now I'll watch it and it kind of gives me like a little like a little shudder there. No pun intended to Shudder, which we love so much on.
Well, that's a nice segue because speaking of Shudder,
there you go.
And again, we're not being paid by the fine folks over at Shudder.
No.
I realized that they have they let you browse by collection, and they have a collection of just shorts. So I've been kind of working my way through those. There's only about a dozen on there right now, but if you have a few minutes, go check out that collection. If you click on the browse or whatever and browse collections, I think it's called Bites or something like that. And I watched one tonight called Jack Attack, which was really cool. It would not be out of place in Tales of Halloween or Trick or Treat or something like that. It's a very good little Halloween themed short. There's another one on there called Lake Nowhere, which is like a retro slasher throwback, which is really entertaining.
So how long are these about? When you say short, are they like 10, 20 minutes or?
Yeah, like Lake Nowhere, I think is roughly a half hour. Jack Attack is only 7-8 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So they vary. And I watched another one called Venefica. I guess that's how you pronounce it. And wasn't too impressed with that one. But there's only a dozen on there, so I'm going to work my way through all of them eventually. But
wasn't that Flume ride at Holiday World?
It might have been.
Oh no, that was
the
Giraffica.
The short was not nearly as fun. I can tell you that.
Oh, okay.
But most of them are surprisingly high quality. So yeah, you're gonna have some hits and misses, but I think there's more hits than misses.
You know, that Lake Nowhere, I think I saw something on that. I don't know if somebody tweeted about it or they had a Twitter handle on it, but I definitely saw that. And when you said it was a slasher, it kind of rung a bell to me about seeing something about that. So I'm actually excited that that's on there because I didn't know where I would be able to watch that. So
yeah, it's really good. It's definitely worth watching. And then the big one I saw this week was The Devil's Candy. And we talked about this one a few episodes back because it was hitting limited release on theaters. Well, it was also released VOD. So I decided to check it out. That's the one that stars Ethan Embry.
Oh, right. We did have a whole conversation on that. That's right.
Yeah, and Ethan Embry, man, he's almost unrecognizable in this movie because if you've seen him over the years, he's kind of, balding and, kind of a dorky looking guy. And in this, he's got long hair. He's like a heavy metal rocker type. He's got a full beard and everything. Oh, so, wow. I would not have recognized him if I hadn't seen his name in the movie. But the movie concerns, he's an artist and loves heavy metal and that kind of stuff. He moves into a new house with his wife and his daughter, who's also kind of a punk rocker type teenager or a tweenager maybe. And they find out that the house used to belong to this man who killed his mother and was a little crazy. And you get introduced to this guy. He's played by Pruitt Taylor Vince.
Why do I know that name?
You would recognize him if you go look him up. He was in Heroes. He was the the puppet master guy in the TV show Heroes.
Oh, right.
And he's been in some other stuff. He's got really creepy eyes, and he always kind of gravitates towards these roles. But this movie, and I'm not going to give much away, but this movie goes into some really unexpected directions. It was totally different than what I thought it was going to be. I was expecting sort of a haunted house story, and it's not that at all. It goes into some really, really dark places, but I really enjoyed it. So it's available on VOD. I think it's $6 or $7 to rent. I was entertained. I liked it a lot.
Oh, and yeah, now that I looked at that Pruitt Taylor Vince, I'm looking at his IMDb page. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that he was in that I probably recognized him from. So he was in, I noticed him, he was in Natural Born Killers. So I think that might be one of the places I recognize him. He was one of the wardens in there. And he was if you look at his credits, he's actually in a ton of stuff.
Yeah, he's incredible. Yeah, very good character actor, and he's incredibly creepy in this movie. So I highly recommend it. It was entertaining and very, very dark.
Cool. And that's on video on demand, right? You said that's not on Shudder.
Correct. That's video on demand. I actually ordered it through Amazon, but you can probably get it through iTunes or Vudu or whatever these other sites are.
Was it Prime?
No, I had to pay for it.
Okay.
But it was worth it. I wanted to see it just because it has just came out, and I kind of wanted to cover something a little newer.
See, and to look at Tim's dedication. He's spending his own hard-earned money to report for us there.
Only the best for our loyal listeners.
Yes.
So what'd you get into, Brian?
Well, one of the things I rewatched, which I don't want to get into now because we're gonna actually do the two-parter. I did rewatch it because I had it. I had said last week's show that I had not realized I did not own it, so I bought it and I was kind of in the mood to watch it again, so I watched it. But I'm not gonna go into it now because, like I said, we're gonna have the two-parter. But one of the other things I watched on Shudder was called Killer's Moon, which was this odd British slasher film. The description basically said it's from that whole nasty era of movies. I mean, it just this is almost one we need to review at some point. Some of the lines in it are just ridiculously awkward and out of place, and like if they said in today's film, they would be bashed. But it's kind of about these. I assume this is a school troop of girls, and they're going to they're on some kind of field trip. Their bus breaks down, and they find this house that they are welcomed into. I guess it's like a off-season hotel, I guess. And these crazy mental patients escape from a nearby asylum, I guess, and they basically torment these girls. But the odd thing is they're kind of dressed up. They look kind of like the guys did from Clockwork Orange. So they're in these white outfits, and they're just really crazy. I think they rape some of these girls, and they're torturing them. But the whole time they think they're in this dream, and so it's just a really weird 70s type British slasher. But it definitely was enough to keep my interest throughout it. So you may, if you have some time, you want to look at that. It's like I said, it's on Shudder. And it's some of it is so obscure that it's definitely on the comical side, because it's like the effects aren't the greatest, of course, but it's definitely watchable.
Awesome. Yeah, I love stuff like that. So we'll get into the dismemberment because we have a lot to cover here.
Yeah, this is a long list.
So it's a big Blu-ray release week, although I'm not going to go into great detail on most of these, just because A, I don't know a lot about some of them. And B, we have so much to talk about with our deep cut. So first up, these are the Blu-ray releases for April 11th. We have Lurking Fear from 1994. Kathy's Curse from 1977. I don't know why. I love these 70s movies. I don't know what it is about them, but
I think their names are just literally they just throw. I think they grab two words into a hat and pull them out or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It just appeals to me. House 2 Stories, which is a double feature of House and House 2. Now, I have not seen these in forever, and I actually own House 1, I believe, on DVD. But I was noticing that Shockwave's posted a picture of some set that came out, and I think it's a region 2 of House 1 through 4.
Really? I almost forgot there was.
Yeah, and it's a really cool looking set. But they said, I believe, only the first 2 are region A, which I guess is North America, and the 3 and 4 are only region B or region 2. So I don't have a Blu-ray player that can do region free. I don't think so.
So I guess what we'd have to do is, we're region B. Is that Europe? Is that the one that's in Europe?
I don't know. I'm not into that.
Because if it is, we could just watch the first 2 and then take a flight over to visit our good friend Matt over in Yorkshire.
Well, that would work.
And then we can watch 3 and 4 with him. So there you go.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. We'll get right on that.
Yeah.
And here's a big one, the Phantasm Collection, which includes Phantasm 1 through 4 plus Ravager. Now, I recently bought the Phantasm Special Edition that came out a few months back.
As did I.
So I don't want to rebuy it with this collection, but this collection looks really, really cool.
Yeah, I almost have to. What I may do is just keep an eye on it. And if it ever has a deal on Amazon or something, around Halloween, they do tend to have really good deals on some horror movies. So we could keep an eye on this, because I hate double dipping, especially when, you just bought like a great edition of like usually the first in the series, and then they come out with the box set afterwards. You're like, great.
I haven't looked at the extras. I don't know if the Phantasm included in this set has the same features. If it doesn't, it may be worth the double dip.
True. But
also, Shudder has, it's interesting, Shudder has Phantasm 1, 3, 4, and Ravager, but not 2.
Was 2 a different release? Maybe like a different distributor?
Yeah, it must be a licensing issue. But one thing I need to dig up, if I can find it, is I've actually got a Phantasm clock.
Oh.
And I think it's Phantasm 3. I think it's a Phantasm 3 clock. And I don't know where in the world I got it. I found it in my closet.
Maybe it was your dad. He liked horror movies, right? Maybe.
I don't know. I got it years and years ago. It must have been a gift from probably my brother or somebody got it for me at some point. But it is really cool. I'll see if I can find it. Next up, we have another one. I saw the box art and I was like, dang it. Chupacabra territory.
Yeah. I don't even... I basically know very little about the Chupacabra other than what, little notes here and there what people have mentioned about it, but I have to see this movie because because of the name.
I have a confession. I love anything cryptozoological. So Bigfoot, Chupacabra, Loch Ness Monster. Like, I'm into all that stuff. I don't believe in it, but I like it. Like, I like I listen to Monster Talk, which is a skeptical podcast about cryptozoological stuff, and I like watching like the Sasquatch shows and stuff.
Oh, so you must have liked that. What was that one we talked about, that Bigfoot movie? There were the two, actually, right? Wolf Creek and was one, right?
Yeah, like or Willow Creek.
Willow Creek, sorry. Willow Creek, and then the other one, the Bigfoot, the Lost Coast tapes
Yeah,
that I have.
I'll watch anything that's Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, Bigfoot. I'll watch any of those. Like, I don't care I don't care how bad they are.
Yeah, I kind of and you probably liked, even though it's a little different, but Digging Up the Marrow by Adam Green was
yeah, I really like
that one. That was one of my favorite horror movies I've seen in the last few years. Actually, we like I said, I think I said this last time. We definitely have to do an Adam Green centric episode because all his stuff is just fantastic.
Yep, I agree. We have 21 Days. We have another double feature, Feartown, USA, and The Slashening. Yeah. I like the title.
That's a great title.
The Slashening. We have The Vampire from 1957.
That's very detailed.
Interesting, yeah. Dark Waters from 1993. I don't think this is Dark Water. I think this is Dark Waters. I think it's something different.
Right.
So I don't think it's a Jennifer Connelly thing. Demented from 1980. The Bye Bye Man from 2017.
I'm gonna buy that one. That one looked. I just remember the trailers for that looked really good.
Yeah, well, I'd heard mixed reviews, and some people were making fun of it because they had that poster that was called the Pee Pee Poo Poo Man. Did you see somebody did that?
No,
because they were making fun of the name of this one, so they had done a mock poster and it's called the Pee Pee Poo Poo Man.
Well, just you saying the Poo Man, I go right back to Carowinds and
yeah.
Our friend.
Well, we'll have to tell that story around haunt time.
Yes, that will definitely have to be retold, and I think we might need a return with one of our favorite guests, Kevin Wilson, to do that one.
And then we have yet another release of Alien Anthology, which is Aliens 1 through Resurrection. And I am ashamed to say I don't own any of the Aliens movies on Blu-ray, even though I love them. And so this might be the time to grab that.
Okay, and I'm like the exact opposite. I think I own 2 different sets of this, so I love these movies. I am not buying it again. I'm sorry. I have both of those box sets that they came out with, the quadrilogy, and then the one that came out right before it seemed like right before the quadrilogy, and I've had
the quadrilogy in my cart. Literally had to been at least 4 times.
It probably went up and down in price.
Yeah, and I just never pulled the trigger on it. And then we have a couple of limited theatrical releases for April 7th. One is called The Void, and one is called Bethany. Neither of them looked incredibly interesting to me, and again, those are limited release, so...
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of either one of them either, so...
your mileage may vary.
Yeah. Well, you never know. This could be something we could end up talking about this a year later.
Yeah, the Devil's Candy limited release VOD, I kind of dismissed it, and then I just kept seeing people, going on and on about it, and I really liked it. Now, I mean, it didn't blow me out of the water or anything. It was the best movie of the year or anything, but it's, as far as like an entertaining and worth my $6, yeah, absolutely, I loved it.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe a few months later we'll be talking about one of these, is how good it is and how and what a surprise. So.
Okay, so let's get into our deep cut now. We're going through one of my absolute favorite horror movies of all time, and I was thinking about this, Brian. This might very well be the first horror anthology I ever watched.
Yeah, I would think it would have to be mine, too. I still remember watching this back on VHS when it first hit VHS, and just being in awe of it and loving every minute of this movie.
Now, I'm going to post on Instagram because I have, and I think you said you used to have it too, Brian, the original CREEPSHOW softcover, which was a softcover comic book that went along with the movie, and it basically has cover art similar to the, not exactly right, but similar to the CREEPSHOW comic book in the movie.
Right. And, I think the order is different, right? I think the order is different. There's 2 of them get swapped, I think, right?
Yeah, the Tide You Over is actually next to the end instead of the crate.
Right, okay.
So I found out about this book because a kid in my elementary school brought this into class. And he let me read it. And he actually let me borrow it overnight.
Remember those days when you would like borrow something from your friend?
Yeah, and I read the thing cover to cover over and over, and I was just enthralled by it because I loved horror even at that young age, and I loved comics, and I don't know how much longer later, it's probably a few years later, I was in the library, my public library, and they had it in the library. So I would go there and I would check it out over and over and over and just read it over and over. That's all even before I'd ever even seen the movie.
So that little card in the back just said Tim Wilson, Tim Wilson.
Yeah,
Tim Wilson, Tim Wilson.
they might as well just given it to me.
Yeah. Well,
so
I've owned books that way. I've sort of forgotten to bring them back to the library, and they just charged me for it. And oh well.
Oh well. Yeah, I should have done that with this one because I don't know where at that time you couldn't buy found online. I don't know where you would have found this thing.
I remember I actually saw, comic book stores had it, because I remember I did have an original copy, and I don't know, over the years I lost it. I think I rebought it and lost that one again. So I did find out though. I just reordered it again because there is a new release. I think in May, first week of May, they're re-releasing it again, so I have it on order, and it was pretty cheap. I think it was like $19.99 for it, which is definitely a great price point for that. So I will own it again. But yeah, I think it was at you could get it at comic book stores back then, and I think later on the second and third printings of it, maybe I remember you could get it actually in bookstores like Barnes and Noble and Walden Books and those kind of stores, because they had that really, now it's much bigger, but at the time they had those slim little like graphic novel comic book sections.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could usually find it there, or sometimes you could actually find it in the movie and TV book section, because it was unique because it followed the movie, so it was almost a comic book recreation of the movie at some level. So it was definitely could be found at bookstores later on. I mean, like I said though, you're right. I don't remember where the original one you could have gotten it from at that time, other than maybe a comic book store. But I definitely knew it became more available as it was released later on.
Yeah, and I bought mine several years ago off of eBay because I was thinking back about my childhood and how much I loved that book, and I happened to run across and there's plenty of them still out there. The first edition from '82. That you can still get your hands on for pretty reasonable. You know, this one's not in perfect condition, but it's not bad. It's not falling apart or anything. And so I'll post a picture on Instagram of that.
See, I wanted one that was thrown into the garbage and you know, by my irate father who thought it was disgusting that I read those things, and then get it. That would be cool.
Yeah, there you go. Or have it thrown in the trash by Tom Savini.
That even better, yes. Which we'll get to as a nice little cameo in there.
So this was directed by George Romero, of who needs no introduction.
Right. Once again, that's one of those names that if you hear it and you're like, who? Just turn off the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. It was written by Stephen King.
Again, another name.
Again, yeah. And lots of great stars in this one. Hal Holbrook, Leslie Nielsen, Adrienne Barbeau, Ed Harris, Ted Danson, and even some uncredited people like Tom Atkins.
Yes,
as the dad in the prologue. And I didn't realize this until recently, and maybe it's just because I haven't brushed up on my Creepshow trivia in several years. But Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, plays the little boy.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I think I probably at one point knew that. And then forgot until I was after we watched it for the podcast, and I was doing some research to look for some interesting trivia facts. I was like, oh, that's right. You know, and that kid, he was great in it. You know, he had that. I love how he switched from like this. He was all over the place, and he goes, "Please, Daddy, I'm sorry."
Yeah, it reminded me of my kids.
Oh, they did.
They'll turn on a dime to get what they want.
It's fun. Yeah, it was funny, that part.
He is if you have not read any of Joe Hill's novels, he is an absolutely fantastic horror writer in his own right. Like, he does not need to piggyback on his dad's fame, because he's a very, very good horror writer. I've read I believe every novel he's written so far.
Oh wow. I need to look at some of those.
Yeah, I think he's got 3 or 4 novels and a short story collection. And they're all excellent. It's a different style than his dad, but still very much worth reading. So that's probably why I probably knew that too, that it was his son, and I just forgotten, because at the time, before I had started reading his novels, he wasn't famous. He was just Stephen King's son. Who cares? But
now, I probably should know this, but I'll go to you, who seem to be much more of an expert on it. Had they ever collaborated since this in anything, in like a book or a movie or anything?
I'm not sure. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but it wouldn't surprise me. I'll have to go look that up.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, because I have not read any of Joe Hill's stuff. But now I think that might be something I'm going to research, see which, maybe order, one to start with off of Amazon.
Yeah, I know that his two most recent ones, one is Nosferatu, and it's NOS4 ATU, sort of like a license plate.
Oh.
And that one to me was probably my favorite. But he also, his most recent one was called The Fireman, and that one was really, really good as well.
And it is horror, though. They're all horror, right?
They're horror, yeah, and you can't go wrong with either one of those.
Okay. So maybe that'll be one of the ones I start with then.
Yeah, I would start with Nosferatu. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. So, and if it goes well, just tune in. We may have a Civil Gore Book Club podcast spur out of this one.
I actually read quite a bit. I used to read nothing but horror. That's all I would read, period. And I ended up kind of getting out of that and branching out. Got into more fantasy. Nowadays, I usually have one horror book among fantasy novels, several nonfiction books, that type of stuff. But I'll throw one in there every now and again if it's good. I don't read a lot of. When I was younger, I read everything. So even if it was like the pulp trash stuff, I would waste my time with. I don't do that much anymore. Yeah,
I read actually the first horror book I believe I read was actually Salem's Lot, and it was after I had seen the TV miniseries, which again we need to definitely do that at one point, because that had so many iconic scenes that still I remember today. On that, I had read Salem's Lot, and then I think I probably didn't read much horror until that. I have to say I wasn't much of a reader growing up unless I had to. But I think the next one I may have read after that was possibly Cycle of the Werewolf, actually, by Stephen King. And that was because my friend brought in a copy of it, and it had those really cool illustrations in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the guy that did that, he just recently passed away. Actually, I saw they post that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Bernie Wrightson. He
yes,
did the art for the CREEPSHOW book as well.
Oh, right. Oh, so that was timely then. That was
yeah.
And and I remember just the image. There was the one image that made me have to buy that book was the werewolf was reaching in and ripping the guy's face off in the cab of the truck, and I said, wow, I gotta read this book. And I went out. I think I went to the mall the next day, picked it up and read it, and it was fantastic. And of course they did not do that book justice with the movie version, but I'm hoping that could be something they revisit at some point.
Right, the movie version was called Silver Bullet.
Yeah, and that was just not. I mean, it was okay. It was campy, and it had Gary Busey in it, who, it's just anything he's in is kind of interesting anyway.
Just goes without saying.
Yeah, but it just based on the love of the book for it. But then, I mean, again, how many times do you hear that? Oh, it wasn't the book. They didn't do the book justice. It didn't do the book justice. So, but yeah. So, I mean, I'm hoping that's something they eventually revisit. It seems like they are revisiting. They revisit a lot of his books. So,
well, here's the thing about I've read everything Stephen King's pretty much that he's ever written, and I've probably seen every movie adaptation he's ever done. And for the vast majority of his stuff, none of it measures up to his books. However, I think we're starting to see, with the It remake and some of the other stuff coming out, the Castle Rock series he's doing for Hulu.
Oh, does that look? That just, even though the teaser doesn't show anything, it just looks cool.
Yeah, I think we might be on the verge of a Stephen King, the Dark Tower movie, like kind of a Stephen King renaissance where they actually start making really good stuff out of his books versus these crappy adaptations.
And we shared a tweet on our earlier today about how he was saying how all these looked amazing, like the projects that they're working on for him right now.
I think the level of writing in general for TV and movies and everything these days is among the best it's probably ever been.
Right. Well, I mean, the bar is getting set higher now.
I mean, yeah, some of these like Westworld and shows like that. I mean, it's just astounding the quality of TV and movies that's coming out these days. Like we're being spoiled. I think we're kind of in a new golden age of and especially with nerd pop culture becoming more popular and more successful, and it's no longer an underground thing. I think you're seeing that start to carry over to horror movies as well.
Right.
And not everything has to be throwaway anymore. Like you can actually have well-written, well-acted horror movies these days.
Right, and just the renaissance of previous stuff too, coming back and being remade or revisited. I mean, I don't know if you're a big Twin Peaks fan, but I'm ecstatic, and I cannot wait for the new Twin Peaks series on Showtime.
Well, I never actually, and I know we're kind of going off on all kinds of tangents, but I never watched Twin Peaks. So my plan is before the new stuff drops, I'm just going to binge the hell out of it.
Your Showtime has been airing different like little mini marathons of it. I mean, I've been a Twin Peaks class, so I have all the books. I have that new book that came out the past year. I have the complete series. The one that there was actually two versions. There was one really good set that came out that I could have gotten into a lot of trouble with. Speaking of going off tangents, I could have gotten a lot of trouble with because it came with collector's cards, and there was a set that you only got 3 in the set, and there were some limited ones to get. And the set was $70, I think. And so I was, I gambled. I'm like, let me just hope I get a decent card in it. Of course, I did not. But I was good enough not to go and buy another set. I went online to try and find stuff, and of course the cards were going crazy amounts. And then I was trying to look for a complete set, and I just gave up on it. But then they released another great version on Blu-ray, a complete series, which I'm going to actually begin to watch shortly, I think. Probably starting this weekend, I think, so I can make sure I'm all caught up by the time the series starts. And actually, when we go into that, I do have a little interesting, funny story with the movie Fire Walk With Me. The theatrical release was a good story with that. But so we might have to do that. Well, let Tim catch up and maybe watch some of it, and then we'll maybe once he watches it all, we'll hit maybe do Fire Walk With Me as a movie, because although it's a unique kind of horror, but I still count that in there, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That's my next big like TV project is to burn through those, because there's only 30 episodes or so.
I don't even think there's. Oh no, maybe you're right. Maybe there was 2 seasons. I think the first season was only 7 or 8 episodes. And then there was a 2-hour pilot, which actually released internationally actually had a completely different ending to actually summarize that was it. It was just a 2-hour movie with no intention of a series. So that's kind of obscure to watch that. It kind of changes the whole face of the entire series by capping an ending on it. Mm-hmm. But obviously we've gotten way off track. I apologize.
Well,
but we'll revisit.
This is our anthology episode.
True.
So now, so we're allowed to go off into different tangents.
That is true. We'll go back.
So if we get back to the movie,
yes.
So CREEPSHOW was obviously heavily inspired by the old EC comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and in the early 90s, the comic books, the Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror and Haunt of Fear comic books started getting reprinted. So I would go to the comic book store every month and get the latest editions of all these reprinted Tales from the Crypt comics. And what they did is they would just take, 3 or 4 stories and just put a new cover on them and just kind of rehash them all. They weren't brand new stories. They were just reprints of the old ones.
They didn't need to be. They were great. I remember getting those all the time. You're right. I think those were the 3, and I want to say there was another one in that vein that came out around the same time. I remember there was, and I used to just and they were pretty easy to find too. They seemed to had good distribution, so you wouldn't have trouble finding them or anything. And I remember just some of them were just so fun to read, and especially then if you see a CREEPSHOW, you just can't get enough of these things.
Yeah, and so CREEPSHOW starts off with a prologue with a kid. He's reading a CREEPSHOW comic book, and his dad, who is played by the wonderful Tom Atkins.
Yes, but you all know from Halloween 3.
Yeah. And when I saw him, I just like, I know he's in this, but I always forget somehow because you never think about the prologue.
Right.
And then when I saw him, I was like kind of let out a cheer, like, yeah, Tom Atkins. But so he starts berating his kid for reading this comic trash or whatever. And so the kid goes to his room, and then this freaked me out as a kid. Was this skeleton appears at his window,
and that was supposed to be the creeper, right? That's the creeper.
Yeah, that's the creeper
right.
from CREEPSHOW. And the kid's not scared. He's like he has this wicked smile on his face.
He like welcomes him.
Yeah, he welcomes it, and then it turns this beautiful like animated title sequence that's reminiscent of the comic books. And the entire movie there's transition scenes that look like comic book frames,
which I loved, by the way,
which was great. Yeah, there's scenes where the people turn into the drawing of the comic. The actors like morph into the drawing of the comic book page. And then there's lighting effects. So a lot of the scenes are like garishly lit with red gel lenses or blue to make it look like that old red, blue, green, printing style. So everything they did tried to harken back to those old comic books, even down to the sense of humor. There's if you've watched any of the Tales from the Crypt episodes on HBO, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's this dark undercurrent of humor that lies through all of these types of EC comic stories. And it's sort of a mean-spirited, there's a lot of revenge, there's a lot of people getting their comeuppance.
Right. And as you say that, the one that immediately comes to mind from that Tales from the Crypt is the one with Emmett Walsh. Do you remember that? And I think it was Audra Lindley, the one that the Mrs. Roper.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
yeah.
Remember that, where he was like the really kind of mean husband.
Yes.
That was one of my favorite ones, and that's exactly, it had exactly what you just described. That was if there's an episode to visualize what you just said, that's the perfect one, I think.
Yeah. So having read all those, I mean, obviously I had seen CREEPSHOW before I got into the EC comic reprints. But then after you read, 100 of those stories, you start seeing the same themes over and over. And then you go back and watch the movie and realize like how spot on they were with the tone that they set. And even though Stephen King wrote these stories, they're very, very much in that style.
Yeah.
And you could tell that he really had a passion and love for those comics.
Yeah, no, and he did. He just, even the pacing, the way they had it was almost, I guess if you could pace a movie like a comic book, he kind of did that. And just the way where you can almost see when they meant to turn the page,
So the first story is Father's Day. And this is about a wealthy family named the Granthams, and they meet every year. And there's kind of a weird history around this. The crazy, or maybe eccentric is the better word, Aunt Bedelia, at one point killed her father, Nathan, her elderly father, Nathan. And basically he got on her nerves for demanding he was a demanding father, demanding his Father's Day cake.
Yeah, was he ever?
So she finally bashed the old buzzard's head in with a ashtray. And but anyway, this family meets every year, and you got a great cameo by Ed Harris, who I swear he looks the same as he does today.
He does, doesn't he? He's just got more hair.
Yeah, only slightly more hair.
Right. I think it's just combed better.
Yeah, I think it's just like I was kind of surprised. I was like, man, he still didn't really have all that much hair back then. But I love Ed Harris, so I'm not talking bad about him.
No, yeah, we can't diss his hair. It was more just a commentary on his hair.
Yeah, but this brings up a great point in that this story is a very, very simple revenge tale that you see in the EC comics a lot, which is basically somebody gets wrongfully murdered and comes back from the grave to get their revenge.
Right.
And that's basically all this is. Poor Bedelia is going to get her comeuppance for that murder of her father she did so many years ago, from him basically just climbing out of his grave and killing her, and
Ed Harris in the process.
and Ed Harris in the process,
Yeah,
and I believe a maid got offed as well.
Right, yeah, the
housekeeper.
the housekeeper, yeah. Who I think was supposedly, she was a long time housekeeper, right? I believe she was there.
Yeah, she was there during that. That's the way they justify her. She was kind of
She watched
complicit.
it. Yeah.
Complicit in it. But the point I wanted to make was the stories in Creepshow aren't necessarily, not necessarily have these big twist endings or anything, but they follow the feel of a lot of the comics, which were just very simple, straightforward revenge stories. Guy kills somebody, person comes back from the dead and gets revenge. I mean, a lot of these stories use the exact same plot. They just change the setting.
And if you notice, a lot, even in these, there's similar. There's, I think, at least 3 of them all kind of have that same obvious
right.
revenge
If you look
plot
at
to
the Tide You Over segment, it's basically the Father's Day segment.
it is
It's the same thing. It's just a different set of circumstances.
Right, and at the end, and in the last one, in the creeping up on you, it's done in the same way. It just a little different, but it's the same. They imply that it's the whole thing is a revenge.
Right. But the great thing about the Father's Day segment is the performances are hysterical.
Oh God, yeah, they're
Aunt Bedelia's great. All the wealthy relatives are just complete snob.
like the brother. He's like classic.
Yeah,
Like you've seen that role in about 700 other films as the snobby maybe New England type family, which I'm sure King. I mean, he grew up in New England, so I'm sure he got that. He based that off of somebody. He had to.
Right.
Have.
And then you have the great sequence that the reason we made it our sketch in the beginning was Nathan banging his cane. I want my Father's Day cake. Where's my cake?
And apparently,
bitch.
Yeah, and apparently in this world, Father's Day is a you always think, okay, birthday cake, wedding cake, but apparently in this world, Father's Day cake is a big key.
So at the end, you get this great sequence where undead Nathan, who is now a complete rotting corpse, comes out with poor Sylvia.
Yes.
Who's the other aunt? Her head on a platter, covered in frosting and candles, and he says the famous line, "I got my Father's Day cake," or "I finally got my Father's Day cake." It was funny.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, we could go right off the bat. I mean, to start the movie like that was the perfect one because that's my favorite sequence. I think Tim, you said that's your favorite sequence in the film, and it's such a great. It's got the humor in it, the over the top performances, which were obviously intentional, and they were so great. And it's funny though. I do have one question, and it was actually because I watched this with my wife Julie, who had never seen this before, or at least that she doesn't remember it. She kind of remembers. She said she remembered one of the sequences, but she didn't remember this. She asked up a good point. Maybe you might you may be able to answer this. What about that particular Father's Day made him come back?
Yeah. Again, that's one of those things where these plots were so simple. I don't think it's supposed to matter.
Not that it does matter. It was just an interesting point. Of all the times I've seen this movie, I don't think I ever questioned that.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me think. Was it an anniversary of some sort?
Oh, maybe it was. Maybe we missed that then. Yeah, maybe it was.
I don't know.
They might have said something, now that, what, it's so funny. When you've seen a movie so many times, sometimes you'll actually be so close to it that you may just forget a slight detail like that because you're so focused on some of the parts that you already know. So we could be wrong on that. So
that's a guess. That's a guess. I might be wrong. I don't really see that I didn't make a note of that. So that may just be speculation on my part.
Maybe it was the visiting of Ed Harris because it seemed like he was there for the first time at this thing.
Yeah,
so maybe he spawned all the evil.
Freaking Ed Harris brings out the worst in people.
He does. Him and his extra hair, And he had a gruesome death, if you think about it. I mean, Bedelia actually got it pretty easy. She got killed, but Ed Harris got the giant tombstone crushing his head. Sylvia got her head ripped off and turned into a cake.
Right.
So that Bedelia just got kind of just killed. It wasn't that vicious of a kill if you think about it.
Yeah, she got off easy.
Yeah.
So the second story is The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. And this one, every anthology has to have their comic relief story. And even though all of the stories in CREEPSHOW have a bit of that humor, this is probably the one that's most played for laughs.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen King plays the title role. He usually has a cameo in all of his movies, but this is one of his biggest parts.
Right, and we had mentioned this role briefly when we did Maximum Overdrive, when we gave his other line. But when he said honey, the machine just called me an asshole. Well, and I had said my favorite line up until that was in this movie where he finds his meteor and he just goes, meteor shit. Which is just classic. So
Stephen King plays this hillbilly, but for lack of a better word, Jordy Verrill, who lives out on this secluded country farmhouse, and a meteor crashes on his land, so he goes to investigate, and it winds up touching it, which blisters his fingers really bad, and it's oozing some sort of liquid out of it, and he's thinking of is how best he can profit off of this, and which he does in a couple of really funny dream sequences, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, those little like thought, or his thoughts of it or his dream sequence. Those are brilliant. Yeah, I think there's about 3 or 4 of them, and it's so funny. It's like he can't even control them at some level, because even the bad things he will imagine it coming as bad. You know, it's like he's such like he's down on his luck guy that it seems like even his own fantasies turn against him.
Right, and Stephen King plays this guy to the extreme caricature that you could play him. I mean, he holds nothing back.
No.
So this guy's like complete. If you think about Hee Haw, it's like a character off Hee Haw.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you're familiar with that show up north.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, like the most exaggerated, like overalls and almost cross-eyed hillbilly, like that's him. But he starts itching from this stuff that got on his skin. And he starts noticing that he's starting to grow like this green vegetation on his body.
Yeah, and those blisters on his finger were nasty.
Yeah,
that creeps me
blisters. Out. Yeah. And as the night goes on, this stuff is starting to grow on his furniture, on his clothes, on his body, until finally he can't stand it anymore. He jumps in the bathtub.
Yeah, and don't forget his great line when he's disrobing and he looks in the mirror and he goes, "Not there," which I always used to make me laugh as a teenager, because it's not a secret what he's talking about, and that's just any kind of humor there.
The water is making this plant life grow, or this alien plant life grow. So in the end, we have a very tragic end for poor Jordy, as he ends up blowing his head off because he's just completely turned into this plant covered blob. Very, very tragic and kind of a very dark ending for such a funny segment. But that's kind of what makes it great, is that they balanced all the humor leading up to it with this like really tragic ending.
Which they kind of needed to. I mean, it is a horror anthology, so you can't, as comedic as it was throughout the sequence, there definitely needed to be a dark ending to this. I mean, hence the title, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. It's not like you not know what's happening.
Exactly.
It's where it's heading.
They kind of clue you in. The third story stars Leslie Nielsen, speaking of comedy.
Yes,
right? And Ted Danson, of all people.
Yeah, if you look at it, it's two people pretty much known for their comedy that we know. I mean, granted, Leslie Nielsen was a really accomplished actor throughout. I mean, he was the captain in the Poseidon Adventure. I mean, our generation knows him from Airplane and Naked Gun, and all those other Dracula Dead and Loving, all those comedic things he did. And I actually saw a thing that said after he never played another serious role after this movie. Because I think because the next thing he did, I believe, was Airplane, and once he did Airplane, that was it.
Yeah, and he was so great at it. I mean,
Oh, right. He was creepy. He was sinister.
but you can still see the humor shining through, even all the sinister stuff. But I will have to say, this is, to many people, this is probably one of the weakest segments of the anthology. I don't think any of them are actually weak, but this one, I think some people would probably argue that it's the weakest because, as we mentioned before, it's basically the same plot as Father's Day.
Right.
You have a guy, in this case, killing two people, and then they come back from the dead to kill him.
And you know what? It also reminds me of? Another Stephen King Clay. Reminds me of that, I think the middle sequence in Cat's Eye, where you remember the guy is cheating with his wife, and then he makes him go out on the ledge. Mm-hmm, the Robert Hayes one, he's got to walk around, and then at the end he turns the tide on him, and yeah, he's out on the ledge. It's almost. In fact, it was funny when this sequence was about to come on in my head. Robert Hayes was going to be in it, not Ted Danson, because they reminded me of each other so much. As soon as it started, of course, I remembered. I said, "Oh no, wait, that's Cat's Eye." So
yeah, but ironically, even though it's one of the weakest segments, this was the segment that scared me the most when I was younger watching this. And I believe it's because of the drowning stuff, because I was deathly afraid of water. I didn't like going underwater. I didn't like putting my head underwater. I've gotten over that as I got older, but at the time when I was watching this in the early days of VHS, like, this terrified me. Even reading the comics scared me, because the thought of, like, to take a step back for those who, for some reason, have never seen this movie, which, shame on you. Stop the podcast now and go watch it.
Yeah, seriously.
Basically, Leslie Nielsen's character buries these two up to their necks on the beach, and then lets the tide roll in. So they have the horror of the tide just coming in and slowly drowning them.
And he tortures them, too. He puts the TV in front of Ted Danson so he could watch his lover doing the same thing. So it's bad enough that he's in that fate, but he's watching the girl he loves go through the same thing.
Right, and it was such a horrible way to die.
Oh, God, right.
That this segment disturbed me almost more than a lot of the other ones, because I couldn't imagine, like, being in that situation. It was just horrifying to me.
And it's funny, I thought you were going to say, when you said it terrified you, I thought it was because of the Leslie Nielsen shower scene. But I guess...
Well, that too.
Yeah,
That too. Yeah. I blocked it out of my mind, but thanks for putting it back in there, Brian.
Oh, no problem. That's what I'm here for. What else to co-host for, right? I mean...
Yeah, exactly. So, basically, obviously, he ends up drowning these two by this hideous, torturous method. And, of course, they come back as rotting zombies with some pretty good... I like the... it's kind of cheesy by today's standards, but I kind of like the makeup on them.
Oh,
have they have like seaweed. Like we need to make sure that that these guys were in the ocean. So we're going to like drape pounds of fake seaweed on top of them and stuff. It was pretty funny.
It's like Swamp Thing.
But, yeah, that's basically what it looked like. And so they get their revenge by basically doing the same thing he did to them, burying Leslie Nielsen up to his neck and letting him watch the tide roll in. And I loved his line where he says something like, "I could hold my breath for a long time."
Right. and then part of me, I have to say that the selfish part of me wanted Ted Danson to say, "Well, surely you can't be serious," and then have him say, "I am, and don't call me Shirley." But we know that didn't happen. So
yeah, but I think it brings up a good point again. Even though the story segments might be a little weak, the performances, just the caliber of actors you had in these just elevated them way beyond the source material.
Oh, right. Yeah, even that episode, Ted Danson is, it really doesn't have to do much other than kind of yell back at Leslie Nielsen, but he does it in the perfect campy way that it's needed for this sequence.
Yeah, it's one of those, some movies are more than the sum of their parts, and this one is more because of the sum of its parts. You have these really top-notch actors that went on to do great things. Plus, you've got George Romero directing. Plus, you've got Stephen King writing. Plus, you've got Tom Savini doing effects.
Right.
These are all legendary people coming together. So I don't care what the simplicity of the story is, when you put that kind of talent together, you're going to get something special.
Right, and I never really had a problem with the sequence, although, maybe it was because I saw it when I was younger, so I wasn't as astute at noticing similarities. When you're a kid, it's repetition and everything anyway. So I was in, I guess middle school / high school when I first saw this, I guess. And so it to me, that never even bothered me. I just thought, hey, it's cool. Look at this. These water zombies are coming out, and so,
Water zombies.
Yeah. Hashtag water zombies. We're coining it right now. But I don't know what they call them. But yeah.
So that's going to be our second Kickstarter after we do the Ghost in the Casket.
Yes, right. That'll be it.
We're gonna do water zombies.
Water zombies coming to the Sci-Fi Network.
Oh, I'm already thinking of sequel. Water Zombies 2.
Right. Like, what would be the like? Just no, we can't steal Jaws. We need to think of a good tagline for that.
Yeah, Water Zombies 2. I keep wanting to say Dead and Loving It, but that's a Leslie
Yeah,
Nielsen.
well, there you go. Maybe it could be just like Water Zombies 2, like H2O or something.
H2, no!
Yeah, there you go. That's it. Okay, done.
Done.
All right, look at that. See, look at what you've learned in this podcast. We've already got
3 Kickstarter movies
yes,
ready.
and there were, even with taglines and everything, so.
Keep your ringer on your phone up, because Hollywood's going to be calling any minute.
Any minute. It may be a minute, like maybe 37 years from now, but any minute.
Yep. So story number 4 was my absolute favorite segment when I was younger. I don't know that it is today, because I still kind of like Father's Day is still kind of my favorite, as I got older. But The Crate.
And it's funny you said that. It was the opposite for me. When I was younger, it was my least favorite. Now, but as I've seen it more and more, it's grown on me. So it's fun. It's kind of funny.
I can see that, because I think when you're younger, there's a lot of this. This segment is the longest segment of the movie, but there's a lot of it that is not relatable as a youngster. You have a husband that's basically browbeaten by his total horrible shrew of a wife.
Which, how good is Adrienne Barbeau? Can I just say?
Yeah, she is awesome in this role.
It's almost the same role she plays in Back to School.
Yeah,
it's so funny. She's so good at
I was thinking when I was watching this, I was like, oh my God. I realized that anytime I come across a reference or a conversation or anything about like a henpecked husband or like a overbearing wife, like I realized that in my brain I think of her.
Yeah, she was
like I think of her and him. Like this movie is where I based that relationship off.
Yeah, because she was brilliant. She was horrible in this in terms of the way she treated this guy.
Yeah, and you have to remember, like it's so over the top, but that's how the comics were too. They were written that way. The characters were like these really stereotyped, very exaggerated caricatures of real life, and they play that to a T in the movie as well. Right?
Yeah, and Hal Holbrook's he's a legendary actor, and and he just usually he's more of a force when he's on there, and it was almost as if he was just cowering through his scenes.
Yeah, but I think to get back to the point about you didn't like this as much as when you were younger, a lot of it has to do with marital conflict and the whole plot for getting her down, which we'll get into in a minute. But his whole plot for luring her over to the crate is based on infidelity and all this stuff that's probably over the heads when you're younger,
right?
And is probably even boring, dare I say?
Yeah, no, I was. In fact, when I was younger, and my best friend and I, we used to watch this movie on video all the time. We used to rent it at the video store. A lot of times, we'd actually fast forward that sequence. Because when you're a teenager, it's like, look at the first one. You got the gore, you got the cool, like the comedy in there. The second one, it's like pure comedy. It's Stephen King. You get that in it. Then the third one, you have, although if it went any longer, the third one could have suffered from that a little bit. but it moved enough, and it was freaky enough that it kept your interest the whole time. And then it had the hashtag water zombies at the end. And so then you get this one, which is definitely more of an adult theme to it, to where, you really, a kid is not going to get that. A kid's not going to get the reference. Not that even as adult, as an adult, you may not experience it, but the terms and the type of mood they're trying to set with this.
Yeah, and it's a slower burn. Like I said, it's by far the longest segment.
Yeah, it does. It then, even when I was watching it this time, I'm like, boy, this one really is long. Even though I was enjoying it, I'm like, this one's long.
Well, there's some great sequences. Like they really build up how much he hates his wife, and
again they use that whole like fantasy.
Right,
clips.
He does It reminded me of Throw Mama from the Train.
Oh yes, exactly.
Because they would just imagine, like, you don't know that they're doing a dream, like a daydream sequence, but he basically like shoots her in the head.
Yeah,
or whatever.
And then I think he slashes her with something.
It's one thing, he slashes her. You think that could really happen, but then he kind of snaps to, and you see he was just fantasizing about doing that.
Yeah, you almost want to hear, "Oh, he loves his mama," thrown in there. Sorry, I had to put that in. I like doing that voice. I can't help it. But yeah, so.
But anyway, so this janitor at this university discovers this old dusty crate that was from an expedition, like to the Arctic Circle or somewhere.
Right. Should we go over the different nods for that crate, by the way?
Yeah, we'll get to those in a second, because there are some great nods to that crate.
Yeah.
Because and when I read this comic when I was younger, this story was by far my favorite, probably just because of the artwork. But anyway, the janitor is killed when we discover there's some kind of creature living in this crate. It's apparently been locked up and living in there for who knows how long.
I guess
decades.
It said 18 something, right? It was delivered there.
Like 100 years. And meanwhile, of course, we get Henry, who is fantasizing about murdering his wife because she's such an overbearing bitch.
Yep.
Not that we haven't already said that word on the.
I know, especially this one. I think we've dropped a few curse words on this one.
There's a student named Charlie, I believe, and he also gets offed when he goes down to investigate the crate. And the creature is it looks like a cross between maybe like a baboon and I don't know, like a Sasquatch.
Yeah, those
or something.
teeth on it are epic, though.
Yeah, it's got these great. It's great creature. I mean, it looks kind of. You could tell it's kind of has kind of a mask look to it, especially around the eyes and stuff by today's standards. But it's still a really cool creature design. In fact, it's on that Tom Savini poster that I got at the Mad Monster convention.
Oh, is it?
He's one of the characters on the poster. If you go back and look at it.
Oh, that's cool. I gotta look in there.
Anyway, so there's a guy named Dex who was with Charlie when Charlie's eaten. So he runs to Henry's house to tell him about this creature because it's his friend. He doesn't know what else to do. So Henry decides to hatch a plan to have the creature murder his wife, so that he doesn't get in trouble for it. And so he concocts this story about how Dex was messing around with some of the co-eds and he's basically attacked this girl and she's gone under the stairs and he can't get her out, and he needs his loving wife to come over there and help get this girl out from under the stairs. And
you know what I noticed about that obviously again this probably goes back to the whole thing we mentioned about being young, not catching the themes of it. He played it perfectly. He knew she loved, she was so horrible. She almost got excited. She got
the scandal.
Yeah, she was like, "Ooh, what happened?" She couldn't get enough of it. She couldn't wait to see it. So he knew that was the easiest way to get her over there is just to tell her something horrible, and she'd just be drawn to it.
Yeah. So of course she shows up and gets eaten by the creature, and Henry ends up chaining the crate up and dropping it into the quarry, into the water, presumably, so it sinks to the bottom of the quarry, and this creature will never be heard from again. But I noticed something when I was watching
until
the movie
Water
this
Zombies
time.
3, when we'll do the tie-in.
I don't know what this thing's called. We'd have to have a name for the creature, but I noticed something when I watched this, because I read this story out of all the comic stories from the book. It's probably the one I read the most. And I realized that in the movie, it's clear that the creature escapes. He basically, you can see him ripping the crate apart.
Oh, right, yes.
So at the very end, Henry thinks he got away with murder and he's all, high on the hog, but I guess the implication is that the creature has escaped and will probably be coming back after him or something.
Right.
But in the comic, it's much less clear that the creature actually escapes. The final panel shows the creature's claws like coming out of the crate, but the crate itself is still intact and the locks and chains are still on it. So it was never. It's a very, very subtle difference. I'm not saying it's a huge. I'm not trying to make a huge deal of it, but I just remember reading it as a kid. I never really caught on to the fact that the creature would escape and maybe somehow come back and get revenge.
Well, yeah, in a movie, you can tend to make a stronger case for that. You have to show it. I think if you just saw the claw come out, it wouldn't be as impactful. Yeah.
So I kind of prefer the comic ending a little better because it's a little more subdued, but. It's just an interesting little note I noticed when I was watching it back.
Yeah, now so the crate now is very interesting. There's that crate has not only has it made it, obviously it was a star of this episode, and it had some Easter eggs right on the crate. It said, it's a Julia Carpenter, Arctic Expedition, so and so, whatever the year. So now just a little trivia: Adrienne Barbeau at the time was actually married to John Carpenter, who at the time was actually filming The Thing. So there's definitely, that was completely intentional. And I read a little blurb saying that at the ending of this episode, how they were sitting there talking, they were, I guess, were they playing chess, I guess? The two guys. Yep. They said that's, I guess, there was a nod to how The Thing ended, how there was two guys sitting there thinking that they weren't sure if the creature was alive or not. Same with
yep.
The same with this. And the crate has been in other films. It was in, actually, one film. It was in, I don't watch the show. I know I'm going to get lambasted for this one, but I don't watch The Walking Dead. I've seen a couple episodes, but I've not been a true follower of that show. Apparently it made it into an episode of The Walking Dead. And what I remember from is it had a cameo in Jason Goes to Hell.
Now that I did not know.
Yeah, if you look when it's in the midst of a couple of cameos. It's in the Voorhees basement where the crate is there and the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon, is in there. So they threw in a bunch of little horror Easter eggs in Jason Goes to Hell. There's also reference to they say, oh yeah, it's out that way past the Myers house. So they're just dropping the horror Easter eggs left and right in there. But when they do go down there, when I guess they're looking for that weapon down in the basement of the Voorhees house, there you see that crate, and there's also the Book of the Dead in there. So I thought that was pretty funny when you saw the crate, because it's such a recognizable, iconic image. To find that it's actually been in other movies and shows is pretty cool.
And I think a lot of people that are maybe not as big Creepshow fans as we are, if they think about having seen the movie, this is probably the segment they remember the most, if not Father's Day.
Right. I think Father's Day would have to be the first one they remember, because it starts with such a good impact to begin it.
Yeah.
So they may remember that. But yeah, you're right. You probably would remember that either positively or negatively.
Right.
It could be that boring one. Or
yeah, I just remember the creature design because I love monster stuff. So I love there's a monster in it, a true monster in this one.
Right, and I just remember that was the teeth. I mean, there was just so many teeth in it. It was great.
So the final segment to me has always been the weakest. I don't really care for this segment very much, and part of the reason is because I hate roaches. Now, I meant to ask you this, Brian. What do you call roaches up north?
No, there are roaches. We do. Yeah, they are roaches. We don't get many of them. I mean, the city tends to get them.
But do you ever call them water bugs?
Well, we actually have things that they do call water bugs, but they look different. They're like those little, like, those pill bugs. Sometimes they'll call water bugs with the little hard shells.
No, we call those roly-polies.
Oh, see, now you're getting a real taste of the difference in Civil War. But, yeah, no, we did have roaches. Like, I remember growing up, my mom and I lived in an apartment, and the roaches come out. We'd have those little roach motels set up because you'd see them, and, you get that whole thing where every once in a while you turn the light on in a bathroom, and you'd see one go scatter away. They weren't the size they were in that. They were, like, little ones. Like this,
in this, like down here, they have the big ones. Sometimes they call them palmetto bugs.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's a freaking roach.
Yeah.
Like, don't let anybody down south fool you. Like, down south, we call them water bugs. Like, to make you think it's not a roach. It's a freaking roach. It's not. People will call it water bugs because it's a cuter name for them. Just so like we say, bless his heart, or bless her heart.
Yeah, and that's a good equivalent because I don't find cute should ever be describing a roach.
Yeah. Like, for years, growing up, I thought, that's not a roach, that's a water bug. It's not that bad, it's just a water bug. Then when I got older, I realized, got a house of my own and realized that these things are, in the garage, or they come out during storms and stuff. And I think people call them water bugs because they do, like, if it rains real heavy, it drives them out of the grass and they come into your house and stuff.
Well, I got to tell you, Long Island has worse. They have these things they call them, we call them cave crickets, but technically I think their official term is camel crickets. It basically looks, if at first look you may think it's like it look like a spider, but picture the alien from Cloverfield, but a smaller form, like about the size of a spider, but they're, like a decent sized spider. And these things, let me tell you, they mostly I think they mostly come out in different times of the year, and we have to set a trap in the basement because we get a ton of them, and literally we would go, and these things are so disgusting, they would literally eat each other. So we have this trap of them. Funny story, not to go off tangent. One time my wife set out this trap down, this sticky glue trap of them, and we were catching them, and so we were about to go away, so we forgot and left the trap with about maybe 20 of these things stuck on there. We came back, and all their heads were missing.
Oh!
Right? So we're thinking some animal came in, and maybe like a mouse or something, and ate it, but we're like, well, it's a glue trap, and we've unfortunately caught a mouse on this glue trap, which was horrible. And, because you have to take care of that, and that's another thing altogether. But then we did some research and realized that these creatures will actually eat themselves. They'll eat other versions. A cave cricket, a camel cricket will go on and eat other camel crickets. And the worst part is they're blind, but they will leap towards you. So you have to be quick to kill them. And I've become a master, I have to tell you. I literally can decapitate these things in one swing. So I become like, I can almost see almost like one of those like campy horror movies, like Stan Helsing, but like me, and I could be like the guy killing these crickets. But and they will literally, they always seem to jump towards you.
Oh God, no!
Yeah, so there was literally a time when I was walking down and this thing literally jumped onto my foot, and so these things and my wife cannot stand these things. And our whole garage, which we don't use, which is just pretty much storage, is filled with these crazy things. So, yeah, you can have your roaches down there.
Oh, God, I'll take the roaches.
Yeah, please. I trade you in a heartbeat with these things.
I think our fourth Kickstarter should be the cricketing.
Yes. Yeah, as long as I could be the hero that starts killing these things.
Yeah, as bad as I hate jump scares, I don't like creepy, crawly stuff. I don't like roaches. I don't like crickets. I don't like grasshoppers. Spiders is kind of weird. I don't mind spiders. They don't bother me. But like anything else that's creepy crawly, I don't want it in my house. I don't want it near me. I don't want it touching me.
I think our friend Dan would disagree with you about the spiders, though. Just saying.
Yeah, spiders for some reason don't bother me. Maybe it's because I inherently know that they're good. Like they eat other bugs and stuff.
That is true.
I I let them leave.
I try not to
them
kill
live.
them if I can. I've literally walked a spider in a cup outside and thrown it out the house because
Yeah,
I try
me
not to
too,
kill
but,
them because
man.
they do. Yes, you're right. They do prevent other bugs.
But you can. My wife gets really mad at me though because if I see a roach or a so-called water bug in our house, I will literally empty half a can of Raid to kill the thing, and I will keep spraying even after it's dead. I cannot stand the things, and like I have literally told Olivia to call the exterminator after seeing one in my house.
Oh my god!
And so finally one day I called the exterminator because I had seen maybe 2 in a week.
That's more
and
than
he goes,
enough.
yeah, and I was like, you've got to spray my house, like you got to spray my garage. Well, so he comes in and he's like looking through all the cabinets and stuff. He's like, you don't have a problem, like. He's like, how many have you seen? And I said, I don't know, like 2. And he goes, 2? And he's like, let me check your garage. So he checks the garage. He finds like 5 or 6 dead in the garage, right? And he's like, what did you spray in here? And I was like, oh, I sprayed all this stuff around the perimeter. I sprayed around the outside of my house. I sprayed all the corners of the garage. He's like, you don't need me to come in here. You've already done a damn good job yourself. And he's like, let me tell you something. He's like, you live in the South. You live in a floodplain. He's like, you're going to see these things. He's like, you're never, ever, ever going to get completely rid of them. He's like, you just got to deal with it. He's like, you're going to see them. He said, if you're seeing them dead, that's a good sign.
Right. That should have comforted you at some level.
Yeah. He's like, if you're seeing them dead, you're already one step ahead of the program.
And by the way, with that, go to segue. We'd like to welcome our new sponsor to Civil Gore, Raid.
Yeah. Yeah. I should own stock in that company because, man, I'll go through some Raid.
Yeah.
But,
thanks for telling
anyway.
me. Give me the tip. I could have,
But anyway, so this segment, if you haven't already guessed, is all about creepy crawlies.
Yeah.
And it's a segment where you have this wealthy guy named Upson Pratt.
Yeah, which, look at that name, right?
Yeah. Played by E.G. Marshall. He's a business guy, and he lives in this like completely sterile white penthouse apartment.
And he plays it great. He is so perfect in this role. I mean, I know you may not like it, may not be your favorite sequence, but he's definitely plays it well.
Right, and he's a total jackass to everybody, including his maintenance guy. But he keeps finding these roaches in his house, and he's spraying them. He's got like some suction thing that sucks them up. Or whatever.
Yeah, he's got basically his whole place is this. He's a guy. I mean, before the term germaphobe came out, that's what this guy was, right? Yeah, I mean, he had everything. And I found out it's funny. They kind of behind the scenes of this, they originally didn't. His apartment was supposed to be with this nice rugs and everything, but they figured the effects would not look as good, so they changed it. And that's why they decided to go with this all white sterile thing. I mean, I think he's got his computer there. He's almost got like some sort of a panic room, but it's all made for him and his germophobiness, I guess. So he's got this spray bottle in his hand all the time. He's got white gloves on, I believe, right? He's got some kind of gloves on, and and it's just this. And he obviously lives in a fancy penthouse because I think there's a shot, right, of him with the when he realizes there's a blackout going on. You could see he's obviously on the top floor of whatever building he's at in the penthouse.
Right, yeah. So he has, I mean, it's a very short segment. It's very simple. But anyway, basically they go to show how mean this guy is to justify his impending doom. But he has a blackout. Of course, that brings all the roaches out. And then he retreats to his panic room or panic chamber, and the wrap up is you see his body on the floor, and then in this great sequence, roaches just start pouring out of his mouth and is ripping out of his skin.
And then there's that one that like you see it like going on his forehead. It kind of like you see it crawling under the skin of his forehead.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously a dummy. Yeah. Like you could even tell.
There's even like a kind of a jump cut to it where it's like you could tell they switch from the regular guy, right? E.G. Marshall to the dummy.
It's pretty obvious, but it's still I didn't really mind because it's such a great scene. But man,
I actually think it works that way. It's better, I think.
Yeah, But if you don't like bugs like I do, yeah, you're not gonna like this one.
No,
you're not gonna like this segment.
No, and this when I was a kid, it was one of my favorites because of my friend and I, we tend to laugh. My best friend and I, we tend to laugh at every kind of thing, and the over the topness we used to crack up at, and the meaner he was, the more we'd laugh. You know, high school, that's you laugh at that kind of stuff, and so. But yeah, and I am not a bug person either. I do not a fan of these things, and so seeing that one, I could just imagine if that was me, I'd probably be acting the same way he did, where he's like, and he's stomping and then that one sequence where they all come pouring out used to like that. That gave me nightmares as a kid when they all just decide to come out. I'm like, oh.
Well, it's kind of reminiscent of the sequence in the Tales from the Dark Side movie, which was basically the same people that worked on CREEPSHOw.
It was. Well, didn't you tell me that was supposed to be CREEPSHOw 3?
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be CREEPSHOw 3, and I don't remember if there was a rights issue or what, but it ended up being Tales from the Dark Side. But there's a even better sequence in that one where a cat comes out of a guy's body.
Oh,
comes out of his mouth.
It's funny. I remember that, and I don't remember what movie it was from, but I remember the scene.
Yeah, it's from Tales from the Dark Side.
There you go. So
kind of the same kind of effect, but it's done even better in that movie. Yeah, if you haven't seen that one in a while, go see it. I watched it probably within the last year.
And that's on Shudder, isn't it?
I know Shudder has the actual series.
That's right, Dead Time Tales.
Yeah, Shudder does have the actual Tales from the Dark Side series, though. I've been watching those.
Which I just bought, actually. I just bought the box. Best Buy had it really cheap for the whole series. Yeah. So I picked it up. Really good. Yeah, even though I realized Shudder had it, but that's something I kind of want for my collection anyway.
Yeah, well, you never know when they're going to take it down, too. So
right. I mean, I know Netflix is good about posting those things when things are going to get removed. I don't know if Shudder does. But it's so funny because I still have the Manitou. Again, we had to mention that in our episode, or it wouldn't be Civil Gore.
Still our number one episode.
Yes,
the Manitou.
Of course. And and the thing is, who knows when they're going to pull that one down. It's still on my list on thing, but I'm afraid one of these days they're just going to pull it down and it's not going to be there anymore. And to buy that movie, you're looking at like a $65 investment as far as I know. Although I am going to check when I go to the ChillerCon to see if they have a bootleg copy of it at least.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And if there's two, obviously I'll pick you up on.
Awesome. Yeah, so the now we conclude the movie with the wraparound story. So you remember Billy's dad threw out his CREEPSHOW comic book. Well, it's picked up by two garbage men, one of whom is played by the great Tom Savini.
Yes.
Because he did a lot of acting, actually.
He did, yeah.
Quite a bit more than I had actually realized. But they start flipping through the comic book and going through some of the things you could order, the mail order items, and they notice that there's a voodoo doll you could order, but it's already been clipped out, kind of implying that Billy has ordered this voodoo doll. And then we cut to the inside of the house, and Billy's actually using the voodoo doll to torment and torture his dad. So to get revenge for tossing out the comic book, which is kind of a cool little wrap up.
Yeah. So, and actually, the other garbage man is kind of obviously has a heralded icon as Tom Savini, but he's been in some of the horror movies as well. If you look at his name is Marty Schiff. He was in Dead Time Stories Volume 1. He was in The Haunting Hour. Don't Think About It. I don't know what that is. That looks almost like some kind of like... Oh, it's R.L. Stine. So it's not it's one of those horror movies. But he's been some other stuff. Although I remember him from... there was a show called Out of Control. I don't know if you remember that from Nickelodeon. Back in the days when they had You Can't Do That on Television was on.
Yeah.
And they'd have this show called Out of Control. It was a weird sketch. Dave Coulee was on it. That was...
yes, I remember it. Yep, I remember it.
Well, that was Hearn Burford.
Oh, wow.
He was on there, and I remember that. I was so excited when I saw that he was in CREEPSHOW. And it was also that crazy, wacky Diz, where she used to that like scream that like weird.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
So that I'll tell you, if there was ever like if I ever saw like and it was only on for a year, that show. If I ever saw a compilation of that on in some form, I think I'd buy that in a second.
Oh my god, I blocked that from my memory, but you're right.
Yeah, so
I totally remember that.
Yeah, so that's Hearn Burford there, and so
we're showing our age.
Yeah, and it came out a couple years after Creepshow, but I think I had seen Creepshow after I saw Out of Control. I saw it in out of order there, but but he's been in some other horror movies too. But so it's funny that it's just like that little sequence with those two guys in it. It's like you got one like total icon and then one total like pop culture nerd icon.
Well, I do have a trivia question.
Yes.
For this one, and
which I'm glad you I noticed you put a trivia question because I was so antsy to mention this, but I'm glad we didn't because this probably works really well as a trivia question.
Yeah, so the trivia question is, and I actually did not know this one until I read it for this episode, but what item appears in every segment of Creepshow?
Yes.
There's a prop that appears in every single segment.
And I will tell you this, once again, going back, my wife Julie, who has never seen this before, noticed it. And I did not until this viewing. So
I know, and as many times as I've seen this movie, I've never noticed it.
Right, and when we do give the answer next week, we'll fill you in a little bit of the back, because there is actually a backstory to this, where, I looked it up on my, I tend to, whenever we do a movie on the show, I always tend to look at, like, the interesting trivia pieces, and so there was a whole little backstory to this. So, and the funny thing is, the object is sometimes a lot more obvious than others, and it doesn't, while it's a particular item, I'll give you a hint. It does not always. It doesn't always be the item that it is. It's used as something else in one episode versus what it is in another.
So what about the beer pairing, Brian?
Yes. So this one actually was. I wanted to look for something that was, when you think about an anthology, there's usually different stories. They're not always intersecting, but I think I still found the perfect one. There is a beer called Creeper by Columbus Brewing Company. So we'll have to ask our good friend Chris Rankin. He's in that area if he's heard of this beer. But it's by Columbus Brewing Company. It's an Imperial IPA, and it's called the Creeper. And if you look at actually the logo of it, it kind of has that like little like creepy lettering to it. And so so I can't think of a better one for that.
Right, and the skeleton in the movie is called the Creep.
Right.
So it was fitting.
Right. I mean, unless there was a beer called Bedelia, I Want My Cake. I don't.
Well, there was actually, when I was looking this up, there was actually a beer called CREEPSHOW.
Oh, was there?
But it was discontinued, so I didn't use it.
Yeah, we already did that to you guys with the crocodile beer, with the one for, what was it, Eaten Alive. We gave you one that was no longer available, so we're...
Yeah, I'm trying to find ones that you at least have some shot of tracking down.
Right. Oh, and by the way, I did look up the one you gave me last week for our last the Monster Mash one, and I could not find it locally, but I did. It is a brewery in New Jersey. It looks like one that doesn't distribute very well yet, but it does not mean it cannot be not be found. So. Well, maybe one of my trips to Great Adventure, I'll make a little side trip and head over to get that.
All right. Well, I believe that's it. I think at some point, and this will probably be well down the road, but we should probably do Creepshow too.
Yes. Oh, and actually, now that you said that, I did have a list of little like funny facts and and little trivia, but the show is kind of running long, and we did touch on some of them already. But I will say one of the interesting facts I saw is if you saw Creepshow 2. There was a sequence in there called The Hitchhiker, which was actually my favorite one in that it was only 3 in Creepshow 2, as opposed to the 5 that were in Creepshow. But originally that one was planned if they could not visually get the creeping up on you to work. Because they were afraid, because they did have to get, involving roaches and all that. It was a sequence that they were not sure was going to make a good film sequence. So they weren't sure they were going to be able to do it. So they actually had that one on the ready to go if they couldn't get that one done. So that's kind of interesting. So it was obviously, and it was the closer to Creepshow 2. So it was a great one. So I think that it's interesting to see if that was the one that actually closed Creepshow, the original one, how much different the movie would be.
Yeah, and Creepshow 2 is, most people would probably argue, is not as good, but it definitely has its charms, and it's grown on me over the years.
Yeah, and I just got that great version of it. That big that box set comes with a little like comic in it and a lot of different commentaries and behind the scenes stuff. So I think I might have to whip that open.
I've got the unfortunately I bought it fairly recently. I bought the really cheap bare bones version. It was before the special edition came out, so I probably need to go ahead and upgrade that one. I don't mind double dipping for that.
No, this one's worth it. And yeah, and like you said, Creepshow 2. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna compare the two, the first one is definitely the better. But I like the last two sequences, and the two out of the three of Creepshow 2 were really good. And I think one of the stories in Creepshow 2 was actually one of King's novels, right? The one with the lake, the raft.
Oh,
wasn't that?
No, it wasn't a novel.
I mean, not a novel, but it was one of his short stories, right?
Yeah, I believe it was a short story.
Right. Because I remember, like, purposely, like, being excited when I realized that was a book, that sequence was taken out of one of the books. So I remember I looked that up and read the book version of it. So I
guess we'll go ahead and sign off since this one's running a little long. And
what a shock, right? We went long.
What a shock!
Yeah.
I don't know. We can't just shut up.
But you know what? This one was worth it. This was a fun episode. It's fun when we talk about. I mean, because if you think about it, since we've started this, this was one of since the first episode where we watched Halloween, this was one of the first times we did a movie that we both are just huge fans of. So it was kind of exciting to be able to do this one.
Right, like you said, we'll continue to kind of mix it up, and we'll do some obscure stuff, but we'll also do some stuff like this. So it's just basically a kind of a fan tribute episode to a movie that you probably have already seen many times, but it's just fun to talk about.
Yeah, and to get before Tim does his social media info thing, I'm gonna segue into that by saying, you guys, we have Twitter, Instagram, email, Facebook page, all these ways you could tell us what movie you want to see.
Yeah, we're open to suggestions because we're having to come up with this stuff every week on our own, and we don't know what you want to listen to. If you have one you want us to cover, by all means, shoot us a line. Chances are pretty high that we'll use it.
Yeah, and chances are even higher that we may actually own that movie.
Yeah, exactly. At least Brian does.
Yeah, but Tim and I have a bit of a Blu-ray problem. Although I did refrain from buying that Dolph Lundgren one that we had mentioned last week. What was it?
You got to draw the line somewhere.
What was it?
I don't know.
It doesn't.
Don't kill it.
Yeah, don't kill it. Don't kill it.
Don't kill it, or don't let it die.
Yeah, and it was cheap, but you know what? Rogue One came out, and so I had to buy that, and so I had to limit myself a little bit. I got a lot of stuff coming up, so I figured $14 on a Dolph Lundgren vehicle that I've never heard of, maybe not the smartest choice of.
No. Before I forget, so I always forget this, but please leave us an iTunes review.
Yes.
Because I think we've only got a couple of reviews, and I know there's a way more people listening to the show. So if you could just drop us a quick iTunes review, that really helps the show, and it helps other people find it. And if you want to look us up on Facebook, we're at facebook.com/CivilGorePodcast. We're on Twitter at CivilGorePod, and you can drop us a line at Gmail at civilgorepodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, we're also on Instagram at CivilGorePodcast. And we'll probably be in other avenues before too long.
Yeah, we do have a YouTube page and Vimeo page set up. We're not, so we'll eventually start using stuff for that. But yeah, and Tim's been really good at putting some great content on the Instagram page. He's got some cool stuff that he's been posting up there. Like he had his HorrorCon pictures that he put up there that got a lot of looks, including by Mr. Tom Savini. Liked his Tom Savini picture.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I'm going to post a picture of... I was driving by on the way to my daughter's soccer game, and I passed the diner from Maximum Overdrive every single weekend because I go down... It's on the way to my daughter's soccer field. So Olivia, or my wife, was driving, so I just snapped a quick picture from the car of the diner, which is now painted yellow. But I wanted to post it on Instagram so guys could see what the Maximum Overdrive diner looks like today. It's still there.
Oh, that's great! Yeah, and Tim had texted me that picture. It looked really cool. The fact that it's that we it's such a like an iconic visual from a movie. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, and and I'm sure I'll use that a lot in a couple of weeks when I go to the Chiller convention. So it's not. It's funny. The more I look at it, there's some of the guests there are definitely not horror related. I mean, like I said, there was the Perfect Strangers reunion there. Not sure why that ended up at the ChillerCon, but there is a guest from Maximum Overdrive. Laura Harrington is scheduled to be there, so of course I'm gonna have to stop at that table, especially at least.
Priority number one.
Yes, I promised our guest who was on, Kevin Wilson, that I would make a stop at that booth. So, make sure hopefully maybe she'll. I do notice it's funny. We were talking about this. A lot of the Chiller guests have a little link at the bottom in there where you have to kind of schedule the photo opportunity. So, thank God she's not one of them. She just has her and Stacey Nelkin from Halloween 3, which we mentioned earlier about Tom Atkins. So, I'll try and stop by their table, see if we can get some pics from there. Because they it's always good, especially when you like a movie so much, and they're there. It's kind of fun to kind of mention them, let them know.
Okay, so we'll sign off, and we'll see you guys back here next week.
See you later, guys.